Tony never knew the faces of the two people who brought him into the world. All he had were a few lines on adoption papers, Italian and Spanish descent. Nothing more. No names, no stories, no clues, just a quiet truth that he had been handed over as an infant, like so many kids back then, when a young girl got in trouble and an orphanage was the only place to hide the shame. He was born in 1951, another baby folded into a system that didn't bother remembering much about the children it raised. He grew up inside those walls, learning early how to read people, how to stay out of trouble, how to survive without anyone to run to. But, by his pre-teens, the whispers started. Older boys warning him about what happened to kids once they reached a certain age in the next orphanage outside the city. Rumors. Dark ones. Ugly ones. The kind that made your stomach twist, even if you didn't know the details. By 1964, the year he turned 13, those whispers were loud enough to make sleep feel dangerous. Tony didn't wait to find out if they were true. One night, he slipped out. No plan. No money. No family. Just instinct and fear pushing him into the cold New York streets. He never went back. That was the night Tony stopped being a child, and the night the streets became his only home. When Tony ran from the orphanage at 13, he didn't have a plan. He barely had the clothes on his back. The streets became his only shelter. He slept wherever the night allowed, in alleys that smelled of garbage and rain, on park benches that froze his bones, under stairwells when the wind cut too sharp. Hunger was constant, cold was constant, fear was constant. He learned which corners stayed quiet, which blocks to avoid, and which nights were safest to stay awake instead of risking sleep. Some days he went without food. Other days he found scraps behind bodegas, or whatever he could hustle for a few coins. Eventually, he crossed paths with other boys living the same life. Kids his age, some older, all of them trying to survive one day at a time. They weren't a gang, not yet. They were just boys sharing space, sharing scraps, sharing warnings about which adults to avoid and which nights the cops swept the parks. He grew up on every side of the 5 boroughs: the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, even Staten Island, wherever the streets let him last the night. There was no glory in it, no reputation, no strategy, just survival. Night after night, cold after cold, until the streets became the only home he knew. By his teens, the streets already knew Tony as the kid who could think his way out of anything. While other boys his age were reacting to trouble, Tony was planning 3 steps ahead: where to sleep when the temperature dropped, which alleys stayed quiet at night, which corners were safe, which weren't. Survival wasn't luck for him, it was strategy. People noticed. Street hustlers, corner kids, older teens, even grown men who'd been around longer than him. They all started coming to Tony when something needed figuring out. A bad deal gone sideways, a place to hide out for a night, a way to get food when money was thin, a shortcut through a neighborhood you didn't want to get caught in. Tony always had an answer, and more importantly, his answers worked. He didn't ask for the role. He didn't chase it. It just happened. Because in a world where most people were scrambling just to get through the day, Tony was the one who could see the whole board. And once people realized that, they kept coming back. That's how the name started. Not as a title, not as a reputation he tried to build, but as a simple truth whispered from one person to another. Ask Tony. He'll fix it. Tony didn't plan on staying in the Bronx. At first, it was just a visit, checking in on an old friend who'd looked out for him back when he was a skinny kid running the streets with holes in his shoes. The man owned a small carpentry shop, nothing fancy, but it kept food on the table and pride in the house. Then the stroke hit. One day the old man was sanding down a door frame. The next, he was in a hospital bed, unable to speak. His son tried to take over, but the kid was drowning, not because he couldn't work the tools, but because he didn't understand the business. Contracts, suppliers, deadlines, invoices. It was all slipping through his fingers, and the petty thieves he owed money to weren't helping. A bad wager, the kind that traps you fast. The old man asked Tony for help, and Tony wasn't the type to walk away from someone who'd once given him a hand. So he stayed. He took the books, the contracts, the scheduling. He dealt with suppliers who tried to take advantage. He handled the thieves who thought the son was an easy mark. He kept the shop's name clean, kept the customers coming, kept the family steady. Days turned into months. Months turned into years. 2 years and change. Long enough for the son to learn the business. Long enough for the grandson to grow old enough to sweep the floors and carry small tools. Long enough for the shop to stand on its own again. Tony never asked for money. He never asked for credit. He never even called it a favor. When the family was finally ready, when the shop could run without him, he packed his things, nodded goodbye, and headed back to Harlem, the city he loved the most. He had been gone too long. Tony stepped off the bus just after noon, the sun hitting the pavement in that familiar way Harlem always had. He didn't stop to take it in. He wasn't the type to stand around soaking up moments. But something in his chest loosened the second his feet hit the sidewalk. It was the spring of 1973, and he was only a few months shy of turning 22. He didn't know why Harlem felt right to him. It just did. Always had. He walked the boulevard like he'd never left, hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed, eyes moving the way they always did, taking in corners, faces, storefronts, the rhythm of the block. He moved through Harlem like he'd never left. People noticed him quick. A couple of old heads nodded from a stoop. A bodega owner raised a hand. A pair of teenagers whispered his name like they weren't sure if it was really him. Tony didn't make a big deal out of it. He never did. He just kept walking, checking in on the spots he used to pass through, the corners where he used to talk his way out of trouble, the storefronts where he used to help people sort out their messes. Harlem hadn't changed much. Maybe a new sign here, a boarded window there, but the pulse was the same. He took it in for a second. It felt good to be back. Tony didn't get far before the first familiar voice called out, "Tony? That you?" He turned and saw 2 old friends from back in the day. Men who used to run the boulevard with him before life pulled everyone in different directions. They were older now, a little heavier in the face, but the recognition hit fast. They came in with wide grins and open arms. "Man, look at you," one of them said, giving him a quick hug. "Sharp as ever." Tony shrugged like it was nothing. He'd always kept himself clean, polished shoes, pressed shirt, jacket sitting right. Money wasn't loud on him, but it was there if you knew what to look for. They fell into step beside him, the way old friends do without thinking. "How long you back for?" "Where you been hiding?" "You hear about so-and-so?" Tony answered what he felt like answering, and let the rest roll off. He wasn't big on explanations. Never had been. More faces appeared as they walked. Guys from the courts, a woman who used to work at the corner store, a cab driver who slowed down just to shout his name out the window. Harlem had a long memory, and Tony had left the kind of mark people didn't forget. He didn't make a big deal out of any of it. He never did. But the nods, the handshakes, the smiles, they meant something. They told him the boulevard still knew him, still respected him, still felt like home. The faces said enough. Harlem still remembered him. Tony was halfway down the block, walking it for one reason only, to run into a friend he trusted like an older brother, someone from the old state orphanage who'd run the streets with him and kept him informed on Harlem while he was gone. A low whistle behind him cut through the block, the kind of whistle meant for one person only. He turned and saw Hector leaning against a storefront gate, arms crossed, expression tight. Exactly the man he'd been hoping to find. Hector, the Cuban kid from the orphanage who'd always looked out for him, 2 years older and sharper in all the ways that mattered, wasn't the type to look nervous, but something in his eyes said this wasn't a casual hello. "Tony," he said, pushing off the gate. "We gotta talk. It's important." No greetings, no small talk. Hector always went straight to what mattered when things were serious, and Tony liked that about him. Tony stepped closer, hands still in his pockets. "What's going on?" Hector glanced up and down the boulevard before speaking, like he wanted to make sure no one was listening. "It's David," he said. "He's been asking about you." Tony didn't react, not a blink. Hector kept going. "He wants a rematch. Been running his mouth for months, telling people he's ready this time, saying he's got something to prove." Tony let out a slow breath through his nose. Not annoyed, just tired of the noise. Hector lowered his voice. "And he ain't just talking, Tony. He's looking for you. Asking where you been, when you're coming back, who's seen you. He's serious." Tony didn't answer right away. He just looked past Hector, down the boulevard, like he could already see the trouble forming. Hector stepped closer. "I'm telling you because I know how this goes. David's not over that first loss. He's been stewing on it. And now that you're back, he's gonna come find you." Tony nodded once, calm, steady, unbothered. "Let him look," he said, and he kept walking. Hector wasn't done. As Tony kept walking, Hector matched his pace, lowering his voice like he was about to drop something heavier than the warning about David. "There's more," Hector said. Tony glanced over. "Go on." Hector scratched his jaw, choosing his words. "David's been chasing this girl. Rosita. Fine girl. Real fine. Works over by the market in Spanish Harlem." Tony didn't react. He didn't know her. Hector continued. "Thing is, Rosita's not looking at David. She's looking for the toughest man around. The one who walks like he owns the sidewalk. The one nobody wants to test." Hector gave Tony a look, the kind that said, "You know exactly who I mean." Tony stayed quiet. Hector sighed. "David thinks if he beats you, even once, she'll look his way. He wants the win more for her than for himself." That landed. Not because Tony cared about the girl. He didn't even know her name until 10 seconds ago. But because it told him exactly where David's head was at. This wasn't about the old fight anymore. This wasn't about the gang. This wasn't about the orphanage or the past they shared. This was about pride, about image, about a girl choosing the wrong man in David's eyes. Hector slowed his steps. "I'm telling you, Tony. David's not thinking straight. He's mixing you, her, the past, all of it. And he's gonna come at you hard." Tony nodded once, not angry, not worried, just understanding the shape of the storm. "Let him come," Tony said. He didn't slow his pace. Hector wasn't finished. He hesitated, then said, "There's something else you should know about Rosita." Tony didn't say anything. He just waited. "She's got a younger brother," Hector said. "Miguel. Kid's been sick a long time." Tony's eyes narrowed a little, not out of emotion, just focus. "Couple years back," Hector went on, "he fell down a flight of stairs. Bad fall. Real bad. He hasn't been right since. Walks slow, gets tired easy. Some days he can't keep food down. Doctors don't say much except it's going to take money and time. Tony understood what that meant in Harlem. Money and time were two things most families didn't have. Hector lowered his voice. Rosita told people she wants a guy who can keep trouble off her brother. School, streets, you know how it is. She wants someone who can handle things. Tony nodded once. He knew exactly how mean the streets could get with kids like that. Hector gave Tony a look. Not accusing, not pushing, just stating the truth. Tony didn't respond. He didn't need to. He kept walking, the boulevard stretching ahead of him, the weight of the situation settling into place. Miguel, Rosita, David, the past, the fight coming his way. It was all connected now, and Tony understood the shape of it. The sun was dropping behind the buildings when Tony stepped out of the Marquetta, a small brown bag in his hand. He didn't get 3 steps before he saw them. 6 rosters leaning against the wall like they'd been waiting all afternoon. One of the many tough street crews in Harlem, now under David's lead. He knew most of their faces. They knew his. One of them straightened up. "Tony, long time." Tony nodded. "Yeah, been a minute." They weren't hostile. They weren't friendly either. Just caught in the middle. Orders were orders. "David wants a word," the tallest one said, jerking his chin toward the street. Tony glanced at Hector, who had just come out behind him. Hector muttered, "Told you, hermano." Tony sighed, not annoyed, just tired. "All right, lead the way." The rosters formed up around them, not grabbing, not pushing, just walking. A loose escort, a show of seriousness they didn't really feel. People on the boulevard watched them pass. Some nodded at Tony. Some stepped aside. Some whispered. Tony walked like he always did. Calm, steady, eyes moving but never locking on anything. The rosters kept pace, glancing at him now and then, like they were escorting a man they respected more than their own leader. They turned the corner toward the abandoned lot. Cracked pavement, rusted fence, weeds pushing through the concrete. The kind of place where boys settled scores because nobody cared enough to stop them. The rosters stopped at the edge of the lot. "This is it," one of them said quietly. Tony stepped forward. Hector stayed close. The air felt heavier now, not dangerous, just inevitable. David looked up when Tony approached, jaw set, pride burning behind his eyes. And no matter all the history between them, it always came down to the same thing. A street test, the young lion stepping up to the older one. Even at 19, he'd already stood his ground against men twice his size. The rosters backed away, giving the 2 men space. The block held its breath. David was pacing in the middle of the lot, shoulders tight, trying to look bigger than he was. Off to the side, leaning against a rusted fence, stood the girl Hector had mentioned. Rosita. Tony took her in the same way he took in everything else. Quick, quiet, nothing lingering. Just details. She was young, maybe 19. Dark hair pulled back, eyes sharp, watching everything. Not nervous, just measuring the room the way people do when they've had to grow up fast. She didn't smile. She didn't look away. She didn't play coy. She just watched. Most men would have stared. Most men did. Tony didn't. He gave her the same glance he gave the fence, the cracked pavement, the broken streetlight overhead. Part of the environment, nothing more. If Rosita noticed that, she didn't show it. But something in her posture shifted, just a hair, like she wasn't used to being looked at and dismissed in the same breath. David saw Tony's eyes pass over her and mistook it for interest. He squared his shoulders, stepped forward, and tried to make himself the center of the moment again. "Tony," he said, voice tight, "we got unfinished business." Tony didn't answer right away. He wasn't looking at David. He was looking at the space between them, the distance, the angles, the way the scorpions were positioned. Rosita watched all of it, watched the way Tony moved without moving, watched the way he didn't posture, didn't puff up, didn't try to impress anyone. She'd seen tough guys. She'd seen pretenders. She'd seen boys trying to act like men. Tony wasn't any of those. He was just steady. And that steadiness made David look even more restless. Tony finally spoke, voice calm. "All right," he said. "Let's hear it." The lot went quiet. Rosita didn't blink. The space between them settled. David stepped forward, jaw tight, trying to look fearless. He pulled something from behind his waistband. A pair of nunchucks, black tape wrapped around the handles, chain worn from use. He let them hang at his side, trying to make the moment heavy. "You remember these?" David said. "Got 'em last year. Been practicing." Tony looked at them, not impressed, not scared, just curious. "Let me see," Tony said, looking at the handles. "Never held a real pair." David blinked. "What?" "Let me see them," Tony repeated. Calm, not challenging, just curious. The rosters shifted. Rosita's eyes narrowed. David hesitated, then handed them over, trying not to look unsure. Tony took the nunchucks, like he was picking up a tool he'd used 100 times. He weighed them in his hand, rolled his wrist once, twice, feeling the balance, the length, the pull of the chain. Much heavier than the ones they made as kids with rope and broomsticks. Then he moved. Not fast, not flashy, just clean. A simple arc, a smooth catch, a tight spin behind the shoulder, a redirect across the front, a controlled stop. He tried the sequence again, a little quicker this time, then again, faster and faster. Each pass cleaner than the last, like his hands already understood the rhythm, the kind of movement that only comes from instinct, not training. The rosters went quiet. David's face tightened. He'd had those things for a year, and still couldn't do half of what Tony just did in 10 seconds. Tony stopped the motion, held the nunchucks still, and looked at them like a mechanic checking a wrench. "Dangerous," he said. "One hit to the head, you're done." He handed them back. David took them slower than he meant to. Tony wasn't showing off. He wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. He was just being honest. And that honesty made David look smaller. Rosita watched Tony the whole time. Not the nunchucks, not the trick, not the movement. She watched the calm, the steadiness, the way he didn't need to prove anything. David cleared his throat, trying to recover. "Fine," he said. "No weapons, just hands." Tony nodded once. "All right." The lot went still. The fight was coming. David stepped into the center of the lot, bouncing on his toes like he'd been practicing in the mirror. The rosters formed a loose circle. Rosita stayed by the fence, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Tony walked in slow, hands loose at his sides. No stance, no tension. Just a man who didn't want to be here. David mistook that for weakness. "Let's go," David snapped, trying to sound fearless. Tony didn't answer. He didn't need to. David lunged first, wild, fast, too eager. A swing meant to impress the crowd more than land clean. Tony saw it coming before David even moved. He shifted half a step, just enough. David's fist cut through empty air. And Tony answered with one punch, a short uppercut, no wind-up, no flourish, just a clean, perfect shot from a man who used to box and never forgot the fundamentals. David's feet left the ground for a second. He hit the pavement flat on his back, eyes wide, breath gone. Silence. The rosters froze. Rosita's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did, a flicker, quick and quiet. Tony didn't stand over David, didn't gloat, Didn't say a word. He just stepped back, hands still loose, breathing steady. David tried to get up, failed, then rolled to his side, humiliated more by the ease of it than the pain. One of the rosters muttered, "Damn." Another whispered, "That was fast." Tony looked at Hector. "We done?" Hector nodded. "Yeah, hermano, we're done." Tony turned and walked out of the lot like he was leaving a grocery store, not a fight. David was still on the ground when the circle broke apart. Two of the rosters helped him up, brushing dust off his jacket, whispering things meant to soften the blow. He shoved them off and limped toward the street. Most of the gang followed him, not out of loyalty, but out of habit. But not all of them. 3 boys stayed behind. The ones who'd known Tony longer. The ones who remembered the winters he kept them fed, the nights he kept them safe, the times he stepped in when nobody else would. One of them, Skinny Jerome, kicked a pebble and said, "Man, that was clean." Another nodded. "Didn't even look like you tried." Tony shrugged. Wasn't looking to hurt him. They believed him, because they'd seen the difference between a man who fights to win and a man who fights to end something. Hector clapped Tony on the shoulder. "Hermano, you still got it." Tony smirked. "Didn't know I lost it." The boys laughed, not loud, not wild, just that quiet street laugh that says, "We're good here." Rosita stayed by the fence, arms still crossed, watching the way the boys gravitated toward Tony without him asking for it. Watching how he didn't bask in it, didn't command it, didn't even seem to notice it. That told her more than the punch did. One of the rosters, Tito, looked toward the street where David had disappeared. "You know he's gonna be mad," Tito said. Tony nodded. "He'll get over it." "Yeah," Tito said. "But we ain't going with him tonight." Tony looked at them, not surprised, not proud, just acknowledging the truth. "All right," he said. "Let's get something to eat." The boys perked up instantly. Food was food, and Tony always made sure nobody went hungry if he had $1 in his pocket. They started walking toward the boulevard, the streetlights flickering on overhead. The night felt lighter now, like the tension had burned off and left only the familiar rhythm of Harlem behind. Rosita watched them go. Tony in the middle, the boys around him, the calm in his step, the steadiness in his shoulders. She didn't follow. Not yet. But she didn't look away either. The lot was emptying out. David was gone, dragging his pride behind him. The rosters who stayed with Tony were already talking about food, drifting toward the boulevard. Rosita didn't move. She watched Tony for a long second, then stepped forward, not shy, not hesitant, just direct. "I guess I gotta stick with you now," she said. Tony looked at her, not understanding what she meant. Rosita lifted her chin. "I'm yours, if you want me." Hector blinked. The boys went quiet. Rosita kept going, voice steady but tight around the edges. "But only if you protect my brother. Miguel needs someone who can keep the streets off him. School bullies, older boys, they pick on him because he's slow. You take care of that, and I'm yours." She said it like a contract, like a deal she'd already decided on, like this was how the world worked, because in her world, it was. Tony studied her for a moment, not her face, not her body, just the weight behind her words. Rosita waited, breath tight, expecting the usual reaction, hunger, interest, eagerness. But Tony's face didn't change, and the silence between them grew heavy. Then Tony finally spoke, while shaking his head. "What makes you think I want you?" The words hit her harder than David's loss. Rosita's eyes flashed. Confusion first, then insult, then something she didn't have a name for. She wasn't used to being turned down. She wasn't used to being anything but wanted. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. I'm offering you. Tony cut her off gently. I'll look into your brother's situation. I'll go to his school. I'll see what's going on. Rosita stared at him, thrown off balance. But you don't owe me anything, Tony said. Live your life how you want. For the first time all night, Rosita didn't have a comeback. She didn't know how to stand, didn't know where to put her hands, didn't know how to be a girl who wasn't being chased. Tony started walking away with the boys. Hector followed. Rosita stayed where she was, watching him go, her pride bruised in a way she'd never felt before. And somewhere inside her, something shifted. Not attraction, not yet, but curiosity, the kind that doesn't go away. Several days later, the small East Harlem apartment felt heavier than usual, the radiator humming while Rosita moved quietly through the kitchen. Her mother still wasn't home from the graveyard shift in sweatshop-like conditions. The morning buses always ran slow, so the back room stayed dark and empty. Rosita didn't expect her for another hour at least. She never did. Miguel, at 15, sat at the small kitchen table, backpack open, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He moved slow in the mornings, always had since his accident. But he tried. He always tried. Rosita packed his lunch the same way she did every day. A sandwich wrapped tight, an apple, a small thermos of juice, a small note folded inside even though she knew he rarely read it. Routine kept him steady. Routine kept her steady. But today, her hands weren't steady. It had been several days since Tony said he'd look into things after the fight with David. Several days with no sign of him. And yesterday, Miguel came home with a bruise on his cheek, a clean slap from an older boy who thought it was funny. Rosita's jaw tightened just thinking about it. "Eat a little," she said, sliding a plate toward Miguel. Her voice was gentle, but the tension underneath it was sharp. Miguel nodded and took a small bite, careful, quiet. Rosita checked his backpack again. Books, pencil case, the little things he needed to get through the day. She checked twice. Then, once more. Not because she doubted him, but because she didn't trust the world he had to walk into. Her eyes drifted to the fading bruise on his cheek. It still made her stomach twist. She muttered under her breath, barely audible. He said he'd help. Miguel didn't hear her. She wasn't talking to him anyway. Rosita checked the small clock sitting on the counter. Almost time to catch the city bus. "Come on," she said softly. "We gotta go." They stepped into the hallway, the third-floor lights flickering like they always did. The elevator had been dead for years, so they took the stairs, Miguel holding the railing with both hands, Rosita staying close behind. She was still angry, still disappointed, still ready to give Tony a piece of her mind if she ever saw him again. The building smelled like old paint and cold mornings. Same as always. They reached the front door. Rosita braced herself for the chill outside, pulling Miguel's jacket tighter around him. This was their routine, their rhythm, their life. And today, she expected nothing different. The morning air was cold enough to bite, the kind of Harlem chill that lingered even in spring. The street was quiet, just the rumble of a distant bus and the clatter of someone dragging a trash can across the sidewalk. Tony sat on the last concrete step outside Rosita's building, elbows resting on his knees, hands loosely clasped. He wasn't leaning cool or trying to make an impression. He was just there, steady, patient, like he'd been part of that stoop his whole life. He already knew their routine. He'd spent several days watching the building, learning the flow. Not nosy, just efficient. What time Miguel left? What bus they took? How long the walk was from the third floor to the street? He pieced it together the way he always did, quietly, without making noise. The building door creaked behind him. Footsteps. Soft ones, Miguel's. Steady ones, Rosita's. Tony stood up before they even stepped outside. Rosita froze when she saw him. Not surprised, not relieved, but hit with a sudden, sharp interruption of the anger she'd been carrying all morning. All week, really. Her jaw tightened. She hadn't expected him. She wasn't ready to see him. She still had words for him, a whole storm of them, sitting right behind her teeth. Miguel's face lit up instantly. Tony nodded once, simple and calm. "Morning," he said. "Come on. Bus will be here soon." He didn't explain himself. He didn't apologize for not showing up earlier. He didn't act like he was doing them a favor. He just turned and started walking toward the stop, giving them space to follow. Rosita watched him for a second. The quiet confidence, the lack of showmanship, the way he moved like he belonged in every corner of the city. Her anger didn't disappear. It just shifted. From heat to confusion, from frustration to something she couldn't name yet. She tightened her grip on Miguel's hand and stepped forward. The day had already changed. The bus hissed to a stop in front of them, doors folding open with that familiar metal groan. Morning riders were already inside. Workers, students, a couple of old men who rode every day just to stay warm. Rosita stepped up first, still simmering. She hadn't had time to shower that morning, hadn't even bothered trying. The first couple of days after Tony said he'd look into things, she'd woken early, fixed her hair, put herself together just in case he showed. But several days passed. Nothing. And yesterday Miguel came home with a bruise. So today she fell back into the rush, the real routine. And the fact that Tony suddenly appeared now, of all mornings, only tightened the knot in her chest. Miguel climbed the steps carefully. Rosita followed, jaw set, trying not to look at Tony behind her. Tony reached into his pocket like he was about to pull out change. The driver, a heavy-set man with tired eyes, looked up, saw Tony, and his whole face softened. "Morning, kid," the driver said. Tony nodded. "Morning." He tapped the fare box with 2 fingers, not dropping anything in, not pretending to. Just a gesture. The driver winked. Tony winked back. No money exchanged, no questions asked. Just the quiet understanding of 2 men who'd crossed paths before, in ways that didn't need explaining. "Go on, take your seats," the driver said, waving them through like family. Rosita noticed. Of course she did. She noticed everything, especially today. She didn't say a word. Not yet. Tony followed them down the aisle, steady, calm, like this was just another morning. The bus doors closed behind them. They found seats halfway down the bus. Miguel slid in first, backpack on his lap. Rosita sat beside him, still tight-jawed, still carrying the weight of the last several days. Tony stood for a moment, holding the rail as the bus lurched forward, then took the seat across from them. That was all it took. Rosita turned on him. "Where have you been?" she hissed, keeping her voice low but sharp. "You said you'd look into things. You said you'd help. And look at him." She angled Miguel's face toward Tony, showing the faint bruise on his cheek. "A day ago," she said. "A day ago this happened. And you weren't there." Tony didn't flinch. He didn't defend himself. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, or seemed to. But halfway through her rant, her voice blurred into something else in his head. Not her words, not her anger. A memory. A nun's voice, sharp, scolding, echoing through the old orphanage hallway. Tony remembering a boy standing in wet shorts, the first time he ever noticed David, too scared to ask permission to leave the classroom because the bathroom was down a dark corridor everyone said was haunted. Tony blinked once, clearing the memory, coming back to the bus. Rosita was still talking, still angry, still hurt. He let her finish. Then Tony leaned forward slightly, eyes on Miguel instead of her. "Hey, Miguel," Tony said, voice calm. "I'm Tony. I'm a friend of your sister." Miguel looked up, shy but curious. "Listen," Tony said, "I'm going to go to school with you today. Just hang out. Make sure things go smooth. That okay with you?" Miguel nodded, a small, genuine smile forming. Tony reached into his jacket. "I saw you trying to fly a kite the other day," he said. "You need better string." He pulled out a spool, clean, tight, perfect, not too heavy, not too light. The kind real kiters used. The label read, "High Flyer." Miguel's eyes widened. He took the spool carefully, almost reverently. He lifted it to his nose and smelled it, his way of appreciating something special. Tony didn't comment. He just nodded, like he understood. Rosita went quiet. She watched the exchange, the gentleness in Tony's voice, the patience in his posture, the way he spoke to Miguel like he mattered. She'd heard stories about Tony. Everyone had. The toughest guy in the neighborhood. The one nobody wanted to cross. But this wasn't that Tony. This was someone else. Someone she hadn't expected. Someone she didn't know how to read. For the first time that morning, her anger loosened. Not gone, but softened around the edges. The bus rolled on. The bus rattled along Lenox, traveling north, sunlight slipping through the scratched windows in thin, uneven lines. Miguel sat with the spool of kite string in his lap, turning it over like it was something rare. Tony sat across the aisle, steady as ever, one arm resting on the back of the seat, eyes on the aisle, not on himself. Rosita watched them from the corner of her eye. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't soft. She was still annoyed, still carrying the sting of his refusal, and still aware this was the one morning she hadn't fixed herself up. Not even her hair. Of course he shows up today. Miguel leaned forward, showing Tony the knot he'd tied on the spool. Tony nodded once, then reached over and adjusted it with a small, precise twist of his fingers. "Like that," he said. "Won't snap now." Miguel nodded, absorbing every word. Tony didn't talk down to him, didn't baby him, didn't act like he was doing charity. He spoke to Miguel like he was a person, a real one, and Miguel responded to that in a way Rosita hadn't seen in a long time. She'd heard the stories about Tony growing up. Everyone had. The fights, the reputation, the way older boys used to cross the street when they saw him coming. But this wasn't the Tony from the rumors. This Tony was patient, quiet, gentle in a way that didn't look soft, just controlled. A gentle, tough guy. Rosita didn't know men like that. Not in her world. Not in her building. Not in the stories girls whispered to each other after school. She didn't trust it yet. Didn't trust him yet. But she couldn't deny what she was seeing. Miguel relaxed beside her, shoulders down, breathing easier, and Tony didn't even seem to notice the effect he had. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was just steady. And for the first time that morning, Rosita felt something shift inside her. Not warmth, not forgiveness, just a small, reluctant curiosity. Who was this man, really? The bus rolled on, and she kept watching. The bus rolled through Harlem with its usual rattle, but the rhythm was off. Rosita felt it before she understood it. A strange smoothness to the ride, like the city had suddenly emptied. They passed the first stop. No one pulled the cord. No one stood up. The driver didn't even slow down. Rosita frowned, glancing toward the front. Maybe no one was waiting there today. It happened sometimes. But then they passed the second stop, and the third. Still no slowing, no brakes, no hiss of the doors. The driver kept his eyes forward, hands steady on the wheel, expression unreadable, except for the faintest hint of a smile when he caught Tony's reflection in the mirror. Rosita noticed. Of course she did. She didn't say anything, but her mind was racing. This wasn't normal. This bus always stopped. People always got on. People always got off. But today? Nothing. It was as if the whole route had been cleared just for them. Miguel didn't notice. He was too busy turning the kite spool in his hands, still smiling from the moment Tony gave it to him. Tony sat, relaxed, one arm draped over the back of the seat, eyes half-lidded, like he'd ridden this bus 1,000 times and knew every bump in the road. Rosita kept watching the driver. He wasn't ignoring the stops. He was choosing not to stop. And every time they passed another one, she felt the same quiet question forming in her chest. Who exactly is Tony? The bus kept moving, uninterrupted, carrying them straight toward the school as if the whole city had agreed to step aside. The bus pulled up in front of the school, brakes hissing as the doors folded open. Students spilled out onto the sidewalk, backpacks bouncing, voices rising in the usual morning chaos. Tony stepped off first. Miguel followed close behind. Rosita stayed at the gate, watching, not trusting any of this, not trusting him, not trusting the morning. They hadn't even reached the entrance when the dean stepped outside. Not a teacher, not an aide. The dean, a woman in a navy blazer, clipboard tucked under her arm, eyes sharp and alert. She scanned the crowd once, then her gaze locked on Tony, and she smiled. "Tony," she said, walking straight toward him. "Good morning." Rosita's eyebrows pulled together. The dean wasn't looking at her, or Miguel, just Tony. And of course, this was the morning she looked a mess. Tony nodded back, calm as ever. "Morning. I've got everything arranged," the dean said. "You can shadow Miguel today. Teachers have been informed." She said it like this was normal, like Tony belonged here, like this wasn't the first time she'd coordinated with him. Miguel looked up at Tony, surprised. Rosita looked at the dean, stunned. "And for lunch," the dean added, "I was thinking we could order pizza for you too. Something simple." Tony didn't miss a beat. "Plain cheese pizza, nothing else," he said. "That's how Miguel likes it." The dean nodded immediately. "Cheese it is." Miguel's face lit up, not because of the pizza, but because Tony knew. He knew. Rosita felt something shift in her chest. A small, sharp realization. How does he know that? Who told him? How much does he know about us? The dean crouched to Miguel's level. "You'll have a good day today, sweetheart. Tony will be with you." Then she straightened and gave Rosita a polite nod. Nothing more, before turning back to Tony. "If you need anything, just let me know," she said. "I'll be around." Tony nodded once. "Appreciate it." He motioned for Miguel to follow him toward the entrance. Rosita stayed at the gate, watching them go. But she saw everything. The dean's respect. Tony's calm authority. The way he knew Miguel's favorite pizza without asking. And for the first time, Rosita realized, Tony wasn't guessing. Tony wasn't improvising. Tony wasn't just showing up. He understood things. She turned and headed back toward the bus stop, the morning colder now, her thoughts heavier than before. Tony didn't hover. He didn't posture. He didn't walk around like he owned the place. He just stayed with Miguel. Class to class. hallway to hallway. And that was enough. Word moved faster than the bell. By second period, the boys who used to snicker at Miguel were suddenly quieter. By third period, they were watching Tony from the corners of their eyes. By fourth, they weren't watching at all. They were avoiding, not out of fear, out of understanding. Miguel wasn't alone anymore. In the hallway between classes, a group of boys stepped aside without being told. One of them nudged another, whispering something that made the whole group straighten up. Miguel didn't notice. He was too busy telling Tony about a drawing he made in art class. Tony listened, nodding once in a while, eyes forward, reading the room the way only someone like him could. A kid bumped into Miguel by accident, a real accident, and froze when he saw Tony standing there. Tony didn't say a word. He didn't even look at the kid. He just rested a hand on Miguel's shoulder and kept walking. The kid exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for a week. By lunchtime, the message had settled into the walls. Miguel is under Tony's protection. Nobody touches him. Nobody bothers him. Nobody even thinks about it. And the beauty of it, Tony never had to raise his voice, never had to make a scene, never had to remind anyone who he was. He just existed. And the school adjusted around him. Miguel felt it too, even if he couldn't name it. He walked a little taller, smiled a little easier, held his lunch tray without shaking. For the first time in a long time, he felt safe. And Tony didn't make a big deal out of it. He just kept walking beside him, steady as a heartbeat. It happened after lunch, in the hallway outside the science room. Miguel was putting his books back into his bag, humming softly, still riding the quiet confidence of the morning. Tony stood a few steps away, leaning against the wall, arms folded, watching the flow of students without really watching. That's when the boy appeared. The same boy who had slapped Miguel days earlier. The one who'd left the mark Rosita saw. The one who thought Miguel was an easy target. He walked up slowly, hands in his pockets, eyes down. Not scared, just unsure of how to start. Miguel froze. Tony didn't move. The boy cleared his throat. "Hey," he said, voice low. Miguel?" Miguel looked up. The boy swallowed hard, then forced the words out. I'm sorry about the other day. I shouldn't have done that. It won't happen again." No excuses, no explanations. Just the apology. Miguel blinked, surprised. Then he nodded once. "Okay." The boy nodded back, relieved. He glanced at Tony, not frightened, just respectful, then walked off to join his friends. Miguel zipped his bag, still processing it. Tony pushed off the wall. "Ready?" he asked. Miguel nodded, a small smile forming. They headed to the next class together, the hallway parting just a little as they walked. The apology settled the air around Miguel, smoothing out the last wrinkle of tension from the morning. The boys who had been watching from a distance drifted a little closer now, curious, unsure, but open. Tony didn't make a big deal out of it. He never did. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, letting the moment breathe. A couple of boys hovered near the lockers, whispering to each other. One nudged another forward, but the kid shook his head and stayed put. Miguel noticed them, then looked up at Tony like he wasn't sure what to do next. Tony stepped in without stepping in. "You guys like kites?" he asked, voice low, casual, like he was asking about the weather. The boys froze. Then one of them nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Sometimes." Tony tilted his head toward Miguel. "He's into it. Big time." Miguel's eyes widened, not embarrassed, just surprised Tony said it out loud. Tony continued, still calm, still easy. "I'm putting something together tomorrow. After 1, out front of his building. Gonna make kites. Fly 'em next weekend if the wind holds." The boys exchanged looks, the kind that said, "Is this real? And are we invited?" Without anyone having to say a word. Tony answered the question before they asked it. "Come through," he said. "Supplies are covered. Pizza, too." That last part landed. Hard. A couple of boys straightened up. One grinned, another elbowed his friend like "We're going." Miguel looked around, stunned. These were the same boys who used to ignore him, or worse, and now they were nodding, smiling, already picturing tomorrow. "Yeah," one of them said. "We'll be there." "Me too," another added. "Same." Tony didn't smile big, just a small one, the kind that said "Good. That's handled." The bell rang. The boys scattered toward their next classes, but not before a few of them gave Miguel a quick wave or a quiet, "See you tomorrow." Miguel stood there, holding his books, trying to process the shift. Tony tapped his shoulder lightly. "Come on," he said. "We're late." Miguel followed, still smiling, a real one this time, the kind that hadn't shown up in a long while. Rosita got home before her mother, same as always. She set her bag down, washed the dishes left from the morning rush, and started warming a little rice and beans. Something simple so her mother could eat and rest before heading out again. Except today, the apartment felt different. Quieter. Lighter. Like the air was holding its breath. An hour later, the front door of the apartment opened. Mrs. Consuelo stepped inside, 42 and a little winded from the 3-floor staircase she'd been climbing for years in that building, shoulders slumped from habit, then lifted, just a little, like the weight she carried every day wasn't as heavy tonight. Rosita turned from the stove. "Mama, you okay?" Her mother nodded, almost laughing, almost crying, not sure which way to go. "Mija, you won't believe this." She set her purse down, hands trembling with a kind of joy Rosita hadn't seen in years. "They gave me a raise," she said, "a real one. And starting Monday, I'm on a 2-week vacation, paid. When I come back, I work days, regular hours, no more graveyard shift." Rosita froze. Her mother kept going, voice soft, stunned. "And they're moving me up," she said. "Supervisor. No more heavy lifting. Mostly light work, checking things, making sure people sign in. I don't even know how. I don't know why. But they said it was overdue." She sat at the table, overwhelmed, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Rosita brought her the plate of food, but her mother didn't touch it yet. She just kept shaking her head, smiling in disbelief. "It's like a miracle," she whispered. "I didn't even ask. They just offered." Rosita stood there, heart thudding, the morning replaying in her mind. Tony at the gate, the dean greeting him first, the way people moved around him, the way the city seemed to shift when he stepped into it. Her mother didn't know, couldn't know, but Rosita did. Not the details, not the how, not the who said what, just the truth underneath it. Tony had been back in the neighborhood for several days, and suddenly her mother's life was changing. Rosita didn't say anything. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. She just sat down across from her mother, letting the miracle settle between them like warm light. Later that day at school, the final bell rang, spilling kids into the courtyard in a rush of backpacks and chatter. The sun had dipped just enough to cast long shadows across the pavement, the kind that made the school look older, quieter, almost thoughtful. Rosita stood at the front gate, same spot as always. Habit, routine, responsibility. She kept her arms folded, eyes scanning the crowd for Miguel, the way she always did, ready to step in if she had to. But today, she didn't have to, because Miguel didn't come out alone. Tony walked beside him, hands in his pockets, moving with that steady, unhurried pace that made the whole world adjust around him. Miguel was talking. Actually, talking. Animated, smiling, pointing at something in his notebook. Tony listened, nodding once in a while, like he had all the time in the world. They spotted her at the gate. Miguel waved first. Tony lifted his chin in a small greeting. Rosita felt something tighten in her chest. Not fear, not anger, just the weight of a day she hadn't been part of. When they reached her, Miguel stepped forward, excited. "Rosita, today was so cool, and tomorrow's gonna be even cooler." Then he paused, squinting at her outfit. "Hey, why'd you change your clothes? Did you have a boo-boo on the way home?" Rosita blinked once, a tiny, stunned pause, then forced a small smile. "No, Miguel, I'm fine." Tony didn't react, didn't look at her outfit, didn't even blink. "Let's head over to the bus stop," he said. "I got something to tell you about tomorrow." Rosita didn't argue, didn't question it, didn't even know where to start. She just nodded, falling into step beside them as the three of them headed toward the bus stop. Miguel in the middle, Tony on one side, Rosita on the other. For the first time in a long time, Miguel didn't look small. He looked safe. They were halfway to the bus stop when it happened. Miguel was walking between Tony and Rosita, clutching his notebook, still glowing from the day. The courtyard behind them buzzed with the usual end-of-school noise. Kids shouting, backpacks slamming, sneakers scraping pavement. Then a voice called out, "Yo, Miguel!" Miguel turned. A group of boys jogged toward him. Not one or two, but a whole cluster. The same boys who used to pretend he didn't exist. They slowed as they reached him, grinning, breathless, energized. "See you tomorrow," one said. "It's gonna be fun," another added. "Don't forget, after 1. We're coming. Save me a spot." It wasn't chaos, it wasn't mockery. It was excitement, real, genuine excitement, directed at Miguel. Miguel blinked, stunned, then smiled so wide his eyes squinted. Rosita froze. She had never seen this. Not before the accident. Not after. Not ever. She'd been bracing for chaos. Police, shouting, crying, something broken. The kind of mess David and the Rosters would have left behind. But this wasn't anything she expected. Because when she left Tony at the school that morning, she thought she'd unleashed the biggest monster she could find to destroy all the little monsters who'd been tormenting her brother. She'd been pushed to the edge, tired, angry, done watching Miguel suffer. She wanted payback, but standing here now, nothing looked like the destruction she'd imagined. The boys kept talking over each other. "We're gonna build the biggest kite. Mine's gonna be red. Yo, Miguel, you gotta help me with mine. Tomorrow's gonna be crazy." They weren't talking to Tony. They weren't talking to Rosita. They were talking to Miguel. Tony stood off to the side, hands in his pockets, letting the moment belong to the kid. He didn't step in. He didn't take credit. He didn't even smile big. Just a small, quiet one. The kind that said, "Good. That's how it should be." One of the boys gave Miguel a playful tap on the arm before running off to catch his bus. Another waved. "Yo, Miguel, thanks for the pizza at lunch today." Another shouted, "Later, Miguel." And just like that, the swarm scattered. Miguel watched them go, still smiling, still processing, still glowing. Rosita looked at Tony. She'd torn her whole room apart, trying on everything she had, clothes, shoes, makeup, all of it, just to look better than she had that morning. And Tony looked like he wouldn't care if she'd shown up in old soggy diapers with a long white dog bone clipped right on top of her head. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. They headed toward the bus, Miguel practically bouncing between them. For the first time in a long time, Rosita didn't see her brother as the fragile kid she had to protect. She saw him as someone the world wanted to be around. The three of them boarded the bus, Miguel first, Rosita steadying him, Tony right behind. The doors folded shut with a soft hiss, and the driver, a younger man than this morning, looked up, saw Tony, and straightened so fast it was like he'd been caught slouching in church. Tony tapped the fare box twice, the same quiet signal as before, and the driver practically snapped to attention, answering with a too-quick wink and a nervous, "Good afternoon, sir. Take your time." He didn't touch the gas pedal until all three of them were seated. The bus was nearly full, but the moment Tony stepped on, an older woman near the front tapped her two boys on the shoulder and jerked her chin toward an empty spot beside her, shooting Tony a quick, nervous smile as she did. They scrambled up without a word, clearing the double seat for Rosita and Miguel like they'd rehearsed it. Rosita and Miguel slid in by the window, Miguel buzzing, Rosita watching everything. Tony took the seat across the aisle, one arm draped over the backrest, relaxed, the same easy posture he'd had this morning, completely carefree. The bus pulled away from the curb. Rosita had taken this route hundreds of times, and it had never felt like this. Most days she and Miguel had to grab whatever seats were left, sometimes separated, sometimes with Miguel wedged between boys who thought teasing him was a sport. She'd spent whole rides twisted in her seat, watching him, waiting for the next shove or whisper. But today, nobody even looked their way. And the few who did weren't looking at her or Miguel at all. They were looking at Tony. Respectful nods from the older men, small knowing smiles from the older women, like they'd seen him grow up, like they knew exactly who he was in this city. A few minutes passed before Tony spoke. "So here's the plan for tomorrow," he said, voice low, meant for them and no one else. "After one, out front of your building." Rosita turned slightly, listening. "I'm bringing tables," Tony continued. "Chairs, supplies for building kites, enough for all the boys, maybe more." Miguel's eyes widened. "For real?" Tony nodded. "For real." Rosita didn't say anything. She wasn't sure she could. Her mind was still catching up. The dean, the boys crowding around Miguel in a good way, the way he walked taller today, and then her mom's good news on top of it all. And now this. Tony kept going, calm, steady. "If the wind holds next weekend, we'll take them to the park by the river. Good spot. Open. Gets a clean breeze." Miguel grinned. Rosita stared ahead, overwhelmed, but not in a bad way. Just in a way she didn't have words for. The bus rolled through the neighborhood, but something was off again. Or maybe not off. Just different again. Rosita experienced an eerie déjà vu. She'd ridden this route twice today without Tony. Once heading home, once coming back for Miguel, and both times it had been the usual stop and go. Whatever this was only seemed to happen when he was on the bus. The driver wasn't stopping. Not at 133rd. Not at 129th. Not at the bodega on 125th. Not at the corner where the old man with the cane usually got off. People stayed seated, quiet, patient. Some glanced at Tony, not fearful, not tense, just warm, like they knew him, like he'd done something for them once, or for someone they loved. A woman near the front gave him a small smile. A man in work boots nodded. A teenager lifted his chin in recognition. Tony didn't acknowledge any of it. He just sat there, relaxed, like this was normal. She wasn't in the know the way she thought she was. The bus finally slowed in front of their building. The first stop it had made since they boarded. Tony stood up. As Rosita helped Miguel to his feet, Tony turned to the passengers. Tomorrow, he said, voice carrying just enough. He nodded toward the windows on their side of the bus. Pizza block party in front of this building. After 1. Bring your kids. Bring whoever. A few smiles. A couple of nods. Someone said, "We'll be there." Tony stepped off first. Rosita and Miguel followed. The bus doors closed behind them, and the engine rumbled away, carrying a bus full of people who suddenly had plans for Saturday. They were already on the sidewalk, the noise of the block all around them, kids yelling, doors slamming, someone calling from a window. But inside, Rosita, something went still. She adjusted Miguel's backpack on his shoulder, still trying to process the day. The dean, the boys crowding around Miguel in a good way, the way he walked taller today, and then her mom's good news on top of it all. Tony looked around the courtyard of their building, hands in his pockets, taking in the space like he was measuring it for tomorrow. "There'll be a pizza block party here tomorrow," he said, voice carrying just enough for the neighbors on the benches to hear. "After 1, bring your kids, bring whoever." A couple of people nodded from across the yard. Someone waved. Someone else said, "We'll be there." Rosita blinked. She hadn't expected any of this. "You're doing all this for my brother?" she asked quietly. Tony shrugged. "Easy. I just got back into town. Everybody I know's been waiting on a proper reunion. Figured, why not here? Tomorrow's supposed to be sunny." He said it like it was nothing, like throwing a block party was the most natural thing in the world. They walked toward the entrance of the building. Mrs. Consuelo was already outside, standing by the doorway, the way she always did when Miguel came home. Tired, steady, holding herself together with the last bit of energy from her shift. She spotted Tony first. Her eyes widened. "Tony?" she said, hand rising to her chest. "Dios mío. Long time." Rosita froze. Long time? She looked between them, confused. Tony had barely spoken to her all day, barely reacted to anything she said, and now her mother was greeting him like an old dear neighbor returning from a long trip. Tony stepped forward, warm but not dramatic. "Mrs. Consuelo," he said. "Been a while. How you been?" His tone was softer than anything he'd used with Rosita. Gentler, respectful, like he was speaking to someone who mattered. She shook her head, still stunned. I heard you were gone." "Yeah," he said softly. "Sorry I haven't been around. Heard what happened to your husband. Awful thing. He'll be missed." Her eyes watered, just a little. Rosita stared at him. This was not the man who brushed off her insults, who barely reacted to her anger, who treated her like background noise. This was someone else, someone her mother knew. Tony continued, gentle but steady. "If there's anything you need, anything at all, bother me. I got nothing to do. I'm bored. Always." He grinned, that small, crooked grin that made heavy things feel lighter. Mrs. Consuelo let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Tony stepped back, giving her space. "See you tomorrow," he said. "I'll be around noon, bringing the boys." He gave Miguel a nod, gave Rosita another, then walked off down the sidewalk. Unhurried, hands in his pockets, the city folding around him like it had been waiting for him to return. Rosita watched him go. For the first time, she understood. Tony wasn't just someone who showed up. He was someone the neighborhood remembered. Someone the neighborhood trusted. Someone who could shift the air just by being there. Miguel squeezed her hand. "Mañana's gonna be fun," he said. Rosita nodded, still watching the corner where Tony disappeared. "Yeah," she whispered. "It is." To be continued.